Cystic fibrosis is what we're talking about next on the program. It affects 30,000 people in the U.S., 70,000 worldwide. But the good news that our guest is going to share next is that you're making great strides in treatments.
Absolutely.
And you're seeing the life expectancy of patients really increasing. That's the great news. Leigh Ellington is the executive director of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, the Tennessee chapter. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity to come.
We're so glad for you to be here. So let's start off with the good news about how far we've come. I know when I first moved to Nashville 20-some years ago, I was involved in an event raising money for CF. And it seemed like the average life expectancy at that time was maybe in the 20s, late 20s.
That would be about right.
And it's a different story, a better story today.
It is. It's a much better story today. Our individuals with cystic fibrosis are living into their 30s, 40s, and beyond. You know, they are having the opportunity to get married and start families, or even have careers. And so we are very excited for the progress that's being made.
All right, let's go back a few steps then and start with what really cystic fibrosis, what it involves in a person's body, and what happens to a patient when they develop CF.
Sure, absolutely. So cystic fibrosis is a genetic disease, and it follows a recessive gene. So a mother and a father must both be a carrier of that gene. And if a baby is to inherit both copies of the gene that has cystic fibrosis, which for every time they would have a child, there'd be a 1 in 4 chance that that could happen, then an individual has cystic fibrosis. Some of the early signs could be intestinal issues for infants. It may be failure to thrive. They're just simply not able to gain weight and keep the nutrition that they need to grow. There are also a lot of respiratory issues with cystic fibrosis. So it's predominantly a respiratory and a digestive disease. However, really many other organs, including sinuses, reproductive systems, are also affected by the disease.
Okay, so does it typically manifest itself or show up in newborns? I mean, do you see the symptoms right away?
Not always.
Not always.
Sometimes there are symptoms that are pretty evident. Maybe it's an intestinal blockage upon birth or something like that. However, cystic fibrosis is part of the newborn screening process. So majority of our cases are able to be diagnosed right at birth thanks to that process. Beginning in 2010, all 50 states include screening for the most common types of cystic fibrosis as part of their newborn screening process. So most cases are diagnosed by age 2.
So the testing that they do, what is involved in that testing? Is that a traumatic thing for the infant, or?
Newborn screening is pretty easy. It's just a part of the general panel that they do. Should there be cause to look further into cystic fibrosis, they may do what's called a sweat test, which is really kind of the gold standard for diagnosing cystic fibrosis. It is really what confirms diagnosis most of the time. And that's simply testing the salt level in a baby's sweat. And if it registers over a certain level, then that is a case of cystic fibrosis. I know when I had done some stories in the past on cystic fibrosis patients, I saw treatment where they would sort of, I hate to say pound on the patient's chest. Percuss is the proper term. Describe what happens during some of those treatments, and is that what they're still doing? So airway clearance is extremely crucial. What happens in an individual with cystic fibrosis is this thick, sticky mucus builds up on their lungs and many organs in the body. And so what we have to do is get that mucus out. And so airway clearance techniques can take a lot of different varieties. There is the manual percussion, which particularly with our babies you see a lot. They may lay an infant over their lap and kind of manually percuss in different parts of their chest and their back. We also have more like equipment, yes, which makes it a bit easier. It looks like a life preserver vest, and it sort of blows up like an air pressure cuff does, and you can connect some compressor hosing to it, and it will pulse air into that vest and help shake up the lungs and allow an individual to cough up that mucus that is in their lungs more easily. Is it typically you have to do some of this every day for most patients? That's just part of their lives and treatment? Absolutely. Caring for someone with cystic fibrosis takes quite a bit of treatment. Typically 2 hours a day for 30 minutes at a time, they're going to do that airway clearance. They also could take anywhere from 14 to maybe 16 different medications medications. There could be some nebulized medications while they're doing their airway clearance, saline rinses, enzymes to help them digest their food upon every snack and every meal that they eat. It is quite extensive, the daily regimen, just to keep someone with cystic fibrosis healthy, not to mention the increase in that routine that may need to happen should they be sick.
Oh, wow. So there's a lot of discipline involved if you're a patient or part of that patient's family.
Absolutely. It requires a lifestyle to really care for them. But I will say I'm constantly amazed by those with cystic fibrosis because often it's routine, it is normal. They don't see it at the level that we do. I couldn't imagine having to stop my day twice for an hour at a time to do all of that treatment day in and day out. There is no rest on that.
How does your foundation, how does the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation assist these patients and their families? What kind of support do you provide?
Yeah, so the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation is really, we try to help on multiple levels. One of the first that we realized back in the 50s when the foundation was formed that many people didn't know about cystic fibrosis, including our own medical community. And so educating physicians on what cystic fibrosis was, which then led to the accreditation of our care center network. So there is a pediatric care center and an adult cystic fibrosis care center here at Vanderbilt, to which CF patients can receive the specialized care, including multidisciplinary assistance. So we help fund a portion of those and accredit them. We also are the main drivers in CF research. And so we are working with pharmaceutical partners as well as universities in that research and progressing the symptomatic treatment, but also aiming towards the cure. And some of our latest medications are actually attacking cystic fibrosis at the cellular level, and with the goal of correcting the defect, which can then help them live a more normal life.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for watching Community Health Matters.